Another Saturday, and we're all here together. Leadership. We think about that word, and oftentimes the first thing that comes to our mind is a title or a level of authority. There's really a lot more to leadership. There's a lot more to being a leader. And if you're tuned in here today, you're a leader in some way, in some setting, in some fashion, maybe more than one. So we're going to have a talk about that today, and just invite you to put on the brakes, grab a cup of coffee, and join the conversation. because it is time for Coffee Breaks with Steve. And once again, good morning. Glad you could be here today. If you are tuning in, make sure that you say hello in the chat so we know you're here. Make sure you join the conversation when we get into our topic. In fact, join the conversation now. I want to hear from you. I want to hear what's going on in your life and what you may be doing as we're now fully into spring, although weather keeps kind of jumping back and forth here. But good morning, Jerry Thompson. Shalane is here. Good morning. And Carol is here. Good morning. I know there are others of you tuning in, so do make sure that you say hello in the chat. Some of you may be tuning in on, hi Jay, maybe tuning in on Facebook. Some of you may be tuning in on YouTube. And if you happen to tune in later and you're not watching this live, you can still be part of the conversation. So please do that. All right, listen, I want to get to our topic as quickly as possible. So we're going to start by talking about some special days that are coming up this week. And what's happening all around us. What is happening, I wonder? Well, we've got, this is interesting. The first Saturday in May is National Start Seeing Monarchs Day. Just start seeing them. I guess this is when the monarch butterflies must start to become prevalent, coming out of the cocoons and getting more active. So today is National Start Seeing Monarchs Day, and it's not always on the 6th. It's the first Saturday in May. It's kind of like, the swallows returning to Capistrano. The monarchs are coming out. And I thought that was ironic that the reference was to monarchs, because if you've been paying any attention at all, you know that there's another significance to this particular day that's been going on and is continuing to go on. And that's that we had overnight, very much overnight if you're on the West Coast, but even very, very early in the morning if you're somewhere else in the country, although it was later in the day in England, but they crowned a new monarch. They officially had the coronation for King Charles and his wife, the Queen Consort in England. This morning. So yeah, start looking for monarchs. I guess that has more than one potential meaning depending on what your specific affiliation might be. But yeah, that happened. So let's see what else is going on. What else is happening today? Do you know what today goes on in the East Coast of the United States? There's actually in the South. I don't need that to continue playing. Thank you. We know that there's a God Save the King, but there's something else going on today that's happening. So, yep. The running of the Kentucky Derby, also the first Saturday in May. It's not always a specific date, but it is something that always happens on that first Saturday in May. And I can remember growing up, it was a big deal to tune in and watch the Kentucky Derby, to watch the Triple Crown. I don't know why we necessarily paid that much attention to it growing up. I guess it was just another thing to watch and to enjoy and to pay attention to. But that is happening later today. So if you hadn't already known that and you want to tune in, look for the Kentucky Derby. It's interesting. I find a parallel when you think about the way people dress in England when there's something fancy going on, like a coronation, and the women wear the fascinators and the very fancy hats. And you see something very similar with the way the Southern women dress when they go and attend something like the Kentucky Derby. So interesting. I don't know, it's just an observation on my part. This is also May 6th is also National Nurses Day, and I think we are into Nurse Appreciation Month or week. There are a variety of days. I didn't put them all on here, but there is also, I think this week, a School Nurses Appreciation Day, Student Nurse Appreciation Day. I have several family members and friends who are LPNs or RNs or another type of nurse. And so to me, it's very important and very aware during the pandemic, obviously, of the kinds of things that relatives of mine were doing, who were in the medical profession a variety of ways, including nurses, the things they were dealing with, the things they were exposed to, and the extra hours that they were putting in. So we'll make sure, once again, not something where it's like only one day a year we should appreciate nurses, but just a reminder to appreciate those who work in the medical profession. The 7th is National Barrier Awareness Day. I worked for several years with an organization, for an organization that dealt very specifically with helping people with disabilities and families affected by disability. And I've also had family members who were directly affected by disability. And so I'm very aware of some of the barriers. You know, there were laws with the Americans with Disabilities Act a number of years ago that were supposed to change how a lot of things were dealt with. And what happens, unfortunately, is that in some situations, people, even companies, are not specifically aware of some of the things they need to be putting in place, should be putting in place, that alleviate and take away the barriers that people who are affected by disability have to deal with. But it's a reminder as we go into this next week to be aware of those things. And if you live in an area where you're seeing, for instance, that maybe curbs don't have wheelchair ramps, that maybe access to certain places and certain resources are not being made as available as they should be for someone affected by a disability. And not all disabilities, by the way, not all barriers get in the way of someone who might be using a wheelchair, have some other specific physical limitation. It can be a variety of things. But you know, you can be an advocate on their behalf if you come across something. So just a reminder to do that. And then also the second Monday in May is National Women's Checkup Day. Women's health, we talk about men's health too. We can talk about health in general, but women's health, there's so many important things that women should be doing. Some of them along the entire path of their lives, some as they reach a certain age are recommended. So I know a number of you are out there who are women, and just a reminder to make sure that, I know some of the things aren't necessarily fun or comfortable to do, but your health is huge. So please do remember to get out and do those things. Just taking a moment to say hello to Rick here, Kim Baker, good meowing afternoon, and happy Catter Day. Thank you, Kim. And Carla, were you on there before? If I didn't say hi to you, I'm saying hi now. So, all right. Hey, May 8th, we got to always have the snacks, the food in here, but National Coconut Cream Pie Day, very specific, not just cream pie, but we're talking coconut cream pie. Are you a coconut cream pie fan? Are you a coconut fan? Some people love coconut in different recipes and different baked goods. And some people are like, no way. Get the coconut out of there. I don't like the flavor. I don't like the texture. I don't like the whatever. So you may be a fan. Hang on, I got to take a sip here. And yes, thank you, Shalane, for making sure everybody drinks. Shalane says she is a coconut. Yeah, be specific. Let's see what else. Oh, National Lost Sock Memorial Day. You guys know that I'm all about my socks anyway. And there's always that weird feeling when you finish laundry and you're folding the clothes and you're putting the pairs of socks together, and all of a sudden there's not a match for the sock. And you know that they were in the same dirty clothes hamper. They had to go through the laundry together. Now you can't find a particular sock. So this is apparently the day, May 9th, that we're supposed to grieve and mourn those lost socks. We can't find the pair too. We can't find the other half of a pair. I made a short film. Our family has had a film festival for a number of years that we put on ourselves, short films. And I made one several years ago that was about what happens to the socks that disappear in the dryer. And in the fantasy world of my short film, they were stolen and ended up in a land of sock monkeys, of living sock monkeys that used them to make more sock monkeys. And so that was my theory about what happens to the lost socks, is that they become sock monkeys. All right. Enough of that. May 9th, which is Tuesday, is also National Butterscotch Brownie Day. Once again, very specific, not just brownies. We're talking butterscotch brownies. Are you a butterscotch brownie fan? Put it in the chat here. And let us know what you like. And then May 10th is National Washington Day. That's Washington State. You remember a few weeks ago, we celebrated National Oregon Day. And I put there apparently every week, every month, there is a specific state that is recognized nationally, and it has nothing to do with the date that those states became a state officially. They just, somewhere somebody decided that each month we should appreciate a different state. Well, I now live in the state of Washington, and so I needed to make sure I recognize this day. I don't know what I'm going to do to celebrate on Wednesday specifically, but maybe I just need to go out, and they say, go out and see some of the sights in your home state and appreciate it. So maybe I'll do something Wednesday. We'll see. And then May 11th, which is Thursday, is National Eat What You Want Day. Listen, now we get away from the specifics of coconut cream pie or butterscotch brownies. Eat whatever you want day. Once again, do you need a special day for that? That's kind of every day for me, but I say whatever. And then, as if the butterscotch brownies weren't enough, Friday, May 12th, is National Nutty Fudge Day. Nutty Fudge Day. And fudge, of course, you get is much richer than just brownies. And, fudge is that really thick, nothing but chocolate, gooey, melt in your mouth, stick to the roof of your mouth treat. I'm probably over describing that. But are you a fudge person? And if so, do you like your fudge with the nuts in them? Or are you a no nut fudger? Fudgy. Fudge. Never mind. That's Friday. Also Friday is National Limerick Day. And this particular date is picked because it's the birthday of Edward Lear, who was born in 1812 and became a real purveyor of publishing limericks, and wrote a book in 1846 called The Book of Nonsense that included a lot of limericks. So I thought we'd include one about coffee today. So I'll read it out loud and you can follow along. You can speak out loud wherever you're at if you'd like. But this one goes, to coffee I'm ardently wed, its absence an ache in my head. The term Javaholic, it's not hyperbolic, no matter, I'll sleep when I'm dead. Okay, yeah, there's a limerick for coffee for sure. And then happy anniversary. I didn't have on my calendar any birthdays this week. So if you do have a birthday, if you have anything that you're celebrating, which we'll talk about more here in a moment, please do put it in the chat. But Rod and Kathy Garlick. Kathy is my sister, Rod, her husband, and they are celebrating a wedding anniversary today. So happy anniversary to Rod and Kathy. And you know what? I missed one last week that I could just say about, not say anything about it and not take accountability. But this one I should not have missed. And so I need to make sure that, and for some reason, Shalane is calling me. So we're going to find out why here. I'm actually going to take this call while we're also recognizing Scott and Kathy's birthday. Hello. Was she actually calling me on purpose, or was that a mistake? All right. That was kind of fun, just to all of a sudden have Shalane, who's one of our producers and who is on here. Hello, Kathy Glavin. Hello, Scott Glavin. Yeah, I'm sorry. But listen, I'm also Scott and Kathy. I needed to acknowledge and be accountable for the fact that I missed you guys last week on your anniversary. And so I wanted to belatedly, I think I wished you a happy anniversary on Facebook, but I did not acknowledge it on Coffee Breaks last week. So I wanted to make sure I did that. Shalane, if you were actually calling me for a reason, let me know here. But my phone went off and it was Shalane calling me, which was kind of fun because figure, yeah. You guys are hilarious. Listen, if you do have a special day this week that I did not acknowledge, like an anniversary or a birthday or something else going on this week that you or a close member of your family is celebrating and you want us to celebrate with you, make sure that you put that in the chat. And if you have something coming up that you want us to acknowledge and celebrate with you on Coffee Breaks, you can send an email to cbwsteve@comcast.net, or you can private message me on Facebook. And either way, we'll make sure that that gets in here. All right, enough about all of that, by golly. I want to get to our topic and our guest today, and I want to tell you a little bit about him. It's hard to do a little bit about someone who's got the background and credentials of my guest. And I always look at these bios and as an introduction and think, well, I could truncate this. Can't really truncate it and still give you a clear picture of why our guest is with us today talking about this. So let me just share. As an award-winning professional photographer, Dr. Patrick Jinks knows the value of viewing challenges through the right lenses to achieve success. After a successful 22-year career in nonprofit leadership, Patrick changed lenses to serve the sector from another perspective. Today, he coaches and trains leaders in both the social and corporate sectors with a unique approach focused on clarity, simplicity, and alignment. Patrick is a multi-best-selling author and member of the National Association of Experts, Writers, and Speakers. Patrick has been featured as a game changer and a master of success in USA Today and the Wall Street Journal, respectively, for his fresh take on nonprofit strategy and leadership through the strategic coaching continuum. Also featured on Success Today for CBS, NBC, ABC, and Fox affiliates across the country. His speaking stages range from the Citadel to Universal Studios and from TEDx to the United Nations. Patrick's globally acclaimed podcast, The Leadership Window, is a FeedSpot top 10 podcast for nonprofit leaders. He was recognized as one of the top 10 most influential people in leadership coaching by CIO Views magazine. With a PhD in organizational leadership, Patrick is a regular contributor to Forbes.com as a member of the Forbes Coaches Council. He is a board-certified coach, an adjunct coach and trainer with Leadership Systems Incorporated, and a certified influencer trainer with Vital Smarts. He is a teaching member of the Right Question Institute and holds a Harvard Business School certificate in the question formulation technique. Patrick's rapid success as a coach for nonprofits earned him a spot as keynote speaker at the 2017 Global Leap Summit and an invitation to co-author Taking the Leap, How to Build a World-Class Coaching Business, along with such master coaches as Marshall Goldsmith, Mark Thompson, Mark Steinberg, and Chicken Soup for the Soul creator, Jack Canfield. Patrick's work with Canfield on their second collaborative book, Success Starts Today, achieved Amazon bestseller status in its first week and earned Patrick an Editor's Choice Award from Celebrity Press for his contribution. Patrick's signature solo work is Strategic Fail, Why Nonprofit Strategic Planning Fails and How to Fix It, which premiered on Amazon as a #1 new release in February 2018. I'm out of breath and out of time, so no, I'm just kidding. But listen, you understand why it's important and it's special to have someone with Patrick's credentials and background and understanding of a topic like leadership join us today. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Patrick Jinks to Coffee Breaks with Steve. Patrick, good to have you here.
Man, it's great to be here, Steve. Didn't I send you the little one paragraph bio?
If you did, I missed it, but you know what? I probably would have gone with this anyway, because I think it just, it's helpful to know that somebody has got, and I know you're humble about this stuff and you don't wear all of this on your sleeve, but the reality is when we're going to talk about a topic like leadership, I just think it's important to know that somebody is not just coming at this with opinions. You've got the chops to back it up. But yeah, anyway, you're here.
I'm here, and I've wrote you a limerick.
Oh, good. I'm ready for it now.
Yes, there once was a leader named Glavin. Coffee and chat's what he's having. His guest is a friend, friendship with no end. They're walking a path others walk in.
Oh man, thank you.
And I'll tell you what made me think of that, other than your little limerick, is that we are not we're not creating anything new here. We're trying to walk. You and I were talking a little bit offline about our journeys, from our United Way days and sort of how we got to this place. And we're not the only ones, walking a path of uncertainty. And the leaders that I coach are not the only one. They're not walking alone. And I think that is the value of this, and the value of shows like yours is just a reminder that we're in this together. There's no need to walk a path alone. We're all trying to become better leaders, better people, learn, grow, and So anyway, yeah, there, that's for you. As corny as it may be, I couldn't help it as I
It's
was
not
listening
corny.
to all these. I also feel very uninformed. All these days that I had no idea existed. I'm sitting here going, man, didn't know about that. Didn't know about that. Didn't know about that. It's like, am I in a
Right?
cave somewhere?
Well, and the thing is, there are these sites that you can pull up, like one that
Yeah,
I access. And I mean, I'm only giving a small percentage of the
I
ones that
know.
are out there, and I have the same reaction. I'm like, really? And you look at some of them, and it's like, where did this come from? And sometimes they say, we really don't know where this started or who started it, but it's around, so here it is. It's like, okay, fine, that's great. There's days for everything, and then some. Listen, Patrick, leadership. It is such a we think we know what we're talking about when we say leadership, but it's really in some ways kind of an esoteric term. And I know in your book, you list several definitions of leadership from different sources, but just to start with the basics, what in your from your perspective, what is leadership?
Yeah, I mean, I have a definition of it, and I'll before I give it, I'll tell you the quick story. I'm a sort of nerd and collector of leadership definitions, as you've seen a few of those. And I was doing a workshop one day, and there was a nonprofit expert that was a professor at Duke University, and I've forgotten his name now, but I think he's retired now, but this was probably, I don't know, 15 years ago. I was doing a workshop on leadership and I'm sharing all these definitions, John Maxwell's definition. And you mentioned Marshall Goldsmith, or Marshall Goldsmith, Kevin Cashman, Dwight Eisenhower, And when I was done with the workshop, he came up to me and he said, man, this was a really good workshop. I loved all those definitions of leadership. You left one out. And I said, oh, tell me about it. And he goes, yours. And I said, oh yeah. He goes, if you're going to do this leadership coaching stuff and you're going to speak on leadership and you're going to, purport to be an advancer of leadership, you should probably have your own framework for it. What do you think? And I was like, wow. So I developed it and it's lengthy, but it took me a long time. And I think it is more of a framework than a definition. But at the Jinx perspective, we define leadership as a window of opportunity during which vision, inspiration, and empowerment converge to propel people toward a shared goal. So if I break it down, so it's a long one, it's a window of opportunity, meaning leadership happens in moments. Leadership is not a person. It's not a state of constant being. Leadership happens in moments, often small moments. We think of leadership as the big moments, the Gettysburg Address, and but leadership on a day-to-day basis happens in little tiny moments. It's moments of influence. So it's a window of opportunity during which three things converge, and these are just things I find that leaders can do: cast vision, so help people see something better, new, something ahead that we're all want to aspire to. Cast the vision. Inspiration, and I use that word carefully instead of motivation because I don't think leaders motivate people. I think motivation comes from within, but we can inspire people. So if they're inspired by the vision, and then the third is empowerment. Leadership is about creating an environment where other people can succeed. So when those three things converge, people are propelled toward a shared goal. And if you look at the traditional, leader follower kind of thing, everybody's moving in the same direction. So that's kind of how we define it. And when we're coaching our leaders, we look for opportunities where leaders can do a better job of casting vision, setting inspiration, and empowering people. And there's a lot of things that fall under each of those three things, but that's kind of our framework for definition for leadership. And if I were to sum it up more, I would tell people I'm really a strong subscriber to John Maxwell's definition because his is one word: influence. Leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. It's not authority. It's not position. It's not a title. It's influence. So there you go. Long answer, but
No,
I had to give a
that's a
lot of
great
thought to
answer.
that because I didn't have my own framework for it. And all of these definitions are good ones. There's not a single definition of leadership, just like engagement or many of the other things we talk about.
You mentioned, it's not specifically a title or an authority or something like that. We often tend to equate it that way because many of us who've been involved in business, whether for profit, nonprofit, corporate organizations, we've we've worked within frameworks that involve a certain amount of vertical accountability and responsibility. And we think of leadership as having to do with someone being a manager or a director or a supervisor. And yet, leadership really encompasses every area of our lives. Can you talk just for a minute about the difference between what we think of as formal leadership and informal leadership, whether that's in a workplace or just in daily life?
Yeah, and there's so many ways to talk about that. I guess I would use just a couple of things. We talk a lot about helping people distinguish between being a leader and being a manager, for example. You know, a
Mhm.
manager is assigned a role of managing things. It was Peter Drucker that said, I think, you manage things, you lead people.
Yeah.
So we think about management, you know, I manage a process, I hold people accountable, I have a structure, I make sure that things are being done on time, on budget, and on, you know, all of that. Um, and in management, there is sort of a given a path for being directive. You know, this is what
Mhm.
you do. This is what I need from you. In leadership, it's if you think about managing things and leading people, leadership is about drawing the best out of people, making sure that everybody's moving in the right direction for everybody's benefit, not for the project's benefit or the boss's benefit or the
Mhm.
shareholders' benefit, but for everybody's benefit. And if I was to look at it another way, I would go back to Maxwell's definition. The leadership is
Yeah.
influence. So if you think of that word, it's not, it has nothing to do with position or title. Some of the greatest leaders in my world were people who reported to me,
Yeah.
or people who maybe were my peers in other organizations, or people who didn't, you would have never assumed they were a leader, but they influenced me
Mhm.
with their example, their encouragement, sometimes their challenge, their vision, their trust building. So the lines are blurred, I think, between formal and informal leadership. I don't know that I actually think of it in terms of formal and informal. I
Yeah.
think it's just influence. I think it's just moments of opportunity, windows of opportunity
Yeah.
when people move together toward a better place.
And if you think about that, I mean, when we talk about it, and I love the fact that you said not spending time differentiating between that, because really you think about, in many ways, I think about leadership and influence. This could become a whole different conversation and a whole different framework, but relationship in one fashion or another, it really comes down to relationship, because there are elements of comprehension, understanding, communication, trust that cross over from any kind of setting that you're into another. And when you talk about workplace situations, I like the fact that you said, and I feel the same way, that I very often have experienced leadership and influence coming from people who've reported to me. I used to, for a while, involved with the Association of Fundraising Professionals and a couple of other organizations. I led mentorship programs where they would match up a more experienced nonprofit leader with someone who was just coming into the industry, into a new role. And I used to tell the mentors who were taking on an opportunity to spend several months mentoring someone, if you don't come away from this learning as much as you taught, you haven't succeeded. You should always come away from those situations where you're dealing with somebody who may have less experience in a certain area. You should always come away having felt like in some way you were led towards something new, right?
Absolutely. You know, I mean, you have to grow, and there has to be a vulnerability and a humility that others can see. That I'm not a
Yeah.
leader because I've arrived, and I haven't arrived because I'm a leader. I'm grow. This was the, you know, back to my limerick. We're all walking a path together. I mean,
Yes.
you know, I had there was a police chief in Danville, Virginia, a number of years ago that did part of a leadership session for us, in one of the chamber leadership programs. And I've told this story so many times. I probably should call him and give him, you know, formal thanks for it. But he talked about leadership like this. He said, there are times when a leader needs to lead from the front and say, follow me, I know where I'm going. And there are times when a leader needs to walk from the side, lead from the side and say, I'm with you all the way.
Wow.
And there are times when the leader needs to lead from behind and literally say, you got this, I'm behind you. And the idea is that there's not one, don't say, well, I'm this leader. I'm the in front leader. I'm the beside. He talked about this being in moments. It's ambiguous. It's adaptive. You have to be able to move in and out of those spaces and apply the kind of leadership that the moment calls for.
Mm.
So, and I will say something else, Steve. So you said something a minute ago that made me think of this. I don't remember what it was now, but not to blow smoke, but I think here's what I think of in what you described. I saw you, honestly. We haven't connected deeply in a long time. Years ago, I think you were in a class that I taught on resource development at United Way of America or Worldwide.
Yep.
And here's you make me think of Kevin Cashman's definition of leadership, which is one of my favorites. He defines leadership as authentic self-expression that creates value. Authentic self-expression that creates value. So think about, again, there's no position, no title, no authority in there, no formal, informal, just authentic self-expression that creates value. And he says that's a three-legged stool, isn't it? One, it has to be authentic. People see through the superficial eventually, sometimes more quickly than we'd like to think. Second, it has to get expressed. In some way, leaders have to be good at expressing things in some form or some fashion to advance people. And third, though, it has to create value. And I love that because we all know a lot of authentic self-expressers.
Yeah.
I say what I say it like it is. If it comes across my mind, that's how it comes out my mouth. Just deal with it. Learn me, that's just who I am. Well, that's great. That's authentic and it gets expressed, but that doesn't always create value. Sometimes that's destructive. And so authentic self-expression that creates value is something I've watched you do throughout your journey. I mean, I remember one of the reasons I remember you from a class of probably 25 people is you stood out. You didn't stand out because you were dominant and you dominated the class, but you contributed. You got out what you put in, and you put in a lot, and you asked good questions, and it was relationship. That was the word you used. You formed relationships. You talked to people. You networked with them. You were real in that session. And then as I go on, I watch you today. You don't just post your own content. You respond to other people's content. I see you commenting and asking questions and being there and being a follower as much as a leader, which makes you a leader. And then I see what you're doing today, just adding value. This content is just adding value. You're not running this show to, make a ton of money and do all these things and become famous. You're just adding value, and that's contribution. That's authentic self-expression that creates value. So again, very different way of looking at what leadership is.
Yeah.
But that's what I see.
Yeah. I like that. I like that approach, and it resonates with me. And with that, I think it's just important to mention, Patrick, when we're talking about all these things, it goes well beyond any corporate or organizational setting. One of the things that I've tried to promote with people I know is that in any setting, I mean, we think about, certainly there are situations, teachers, people who are in a formal classroom setting are leaders, but they also, part of the role of a leader is to raise up other leaders, is to recognize, is to take the time to see what the qualities and the specific talents and abilities and skills and desires of the people in that group, and to focus in on finding that leadership quality in everybody. And it can become real easy to see certain people. You mentioned that in the classroom of 25, you taught a number of classes, and there are people who are going to stand out. And part of our role as leaders is to identify the qualities in those people, but also sometimes look beyond those people to the ones who may stand out less, maybe quieter,
That's
maybe less imposing, and to say, what is it about them? We think about sometimes that difference between an extrovert and an introvert. And there are books and there are speakers who are introverts who talk about the fact that introverts bring their own qualities to any setting. But I also think about parents as leaders, caregivers as leaders. And you mentioned something that I think is vitally important, and that is that leaders are also followers. We may lead in one setting, but we're not leaders in every. I don't care what your position is. We're not leaders in every setting. And I've told my kids at times, even when they were younger, is that there are times that you're going to be the one leading, and I, as the parent, am going to be the one following. And part of that is that I need to put you out there, empower you, and release you to do what you're capable of doing. But part of it is I also need to demonstrate to you that followership is as important as leadership, right?
I couldn't say that any better. I'm looking too at a comment. Is it Chalin? I don't know how you say that.
Shalan.
Shalan, I'm sorry. Shalan put a great question in here. I was talking about how leadership is about creating value, and Shalan asked, "Is that in the eye of the beholder? Is value in the eye of the beholder?" And what a fantastic question! And it gets me to thinking about my framework for leadership, which is I think about I'm a coach, so more a coach than a consultant, and a coach is not there to tell the leader how to be a better leader. The coach is there to draw out and elevate the leader's best thinking. So for me as a coach, I'm constantly thinking about creating value for the coachee, not for the coach, not the value of, hey, I got to say something profound and they loved it, right? That's value to me, perhaps, but I want to create value for the people I'm leading. So I think it is in the eye of the beholder, and I think that really makes us pause and think about in which direction is our leadership effort going. I think leadership is about others. And you talked about you talked about seeing the leadership qualities in others. Somebody said once, and I don't know if this is like absolutely true, but it's cool to think about, that good leaders develop other people and great leaders develop other leaders. I think that's kind of a neat way of looking at it. I don't know that it's absolute in all situations, but that's a cool way of looking at it. Is am I shaping a path where somebody else can exert influence that creates value?
Wow. I know we're going to end up running out of time. It's another one of those episodes where we could probably go for 2 hours and keep talking about this. First, a reminder, because Shalan put a question in there. If you have a question, please do put it in the chat. If we don't cover it all during the live episode, Patrick will have the opportunity to go in after the fact and see your questions in the chat and respond to those. So please do take that time. A couple of other things I do want to make sure that we ask and answer before our time ends. The first one is, we hear a term a lot, and it comes up a lot in Christian settings, but it goes beyond that. What is servant leadership to you?
I'm going to be honest, Steve, I think about that differently than I did before my doctoral program, because we actually covered it in depth in the doctoral program, and it was eye-opening for me. So I did my PhD in organizational leadership at Columbia International University, which is a Christian-based, faith-based university. And so we talked a good bit about steward leadership, and I learned something really powerful about it that I'll just try to share briefly. And that is, I have come to view servant leadership as a subset of steward leadership. So servant leadership, to be oversimplified here, is about always serving others. It's always about whoever I'm leading, I'm serving. Mm-hmm. Steward leadership is, I am stewarding the assets of someone else or something else bigger than me. Mm-hmm. And I use service inside that to create value for that owner. So, for example, I work in the nonprofit sector almost exclusively, not completely. I coach some executives in the corporate sector, but in the nonprofit sector was a lot of servant leadership. Many people who get into nonprofit leadership are very altruistic in their motives, and they want to serve, and they consider themselves to be servant leaders. What I try to help people do is become steward leaders, because what a CEO of a nonprofit is actually doing is stewarding the resources of somebody else, an owner. The owner in this case, not being the board, but being the community. Communities literally own the nonprofits, even though they don't realize they're owners of the nonprofits. Yeah. And so stewardship means It doesn't just mean protect. We talked in the university about the parable of the talents. A master gives several people a set of talents, and one goes and comes back and says, I turned your talents, I turned 5 talents into 10. I don't remember the numbers, but and the owner of the vineyard says, well done, good and faithful servant, you turned 5 talents into 10. The other one says, I turned 10 into 20. One of them comes back and says, I buried it, I hid it to make sure that it was protected and I could bring it back to you, and here's the 5 talents you gave me. And he was reprimanded. And so the idea that we learned behind stewardship was stewardship also means growth. My job as a CEO of a nonprofit, for example, is to make sure that we advance the mission and we want to grow. And in order to do that, some individuals may not be served in the way they might want to be served. We have to terminate employees sometimes, for example, if they're not performing. Well, servant leadership is a little bit more difficult context to do that in than steward leadership. In steward leadership, I'm serving a greater cause, not serving each individual on their own thing. So it goes deeper than that. I'm going on too long, but that's how I've come to sort of view servant leadership, is that it's most powerful when it is inside the circle of steward leadership, where we're actually, again, propelling people toward a shared goal, propelling people toward something bigger than ourselves.
Wow. Last question for you, Patrick, and that is, you've talked a little bit about the things that you look for in a leader. Who are the leaders you follow and why?
Interestingly enough, many of the leaders I follow now, well, some of them are, authors and speakers and things, people who have influenced and inspired me. We've talked about a number of them, from Goldsmith to Cashman to Maxwell. Some are people like you who are in the arena with me, creating content, adding value, raising the thought, being provocative, sharpening the saw. Many of those are people actually in my space. I've become good friends and not just colleagues with a number of people who are here in South Carolina that share the space, that are kind of have shown me some things. I keep an advisory board, a volunteer advisory board, even though I'm a for-profit company. My company is a for-profit company. My advisory board is a cross-sector group of people who are just supreme experts at what they do, and I follow them. We've got a meeting on Monday, and we meet a couple of times a year. They're from all over the country, from Oregon to Palm Beach to LA to Austin to Orlando.
Wow.
And those are people who I respect and trust, and I want them to always be coaching me, making me think about things, because who's gonna fix the plumber's sink? So, and then, I've watched my wife lead me. I mean, talk about authentic self-expression that creates value or influence, or, being willing to encourage me when she knows that's what I need, and to correct me when she knows that's what I need. I've watched my kids lead, in their workplace and in their families. Really, really incredible. So again, because it's formal and informal, and I don't see the difference, we could go another hour talking about the leaders that are influencing me today.
This is something you can come back to and add in the comments later on if you'd like to, Patrick. I just wanted to put this out there. Carol asked, love to delve deeper into the concept of steward leadership. Are there resources you could recommend? So I know we're going to run very, very short on time, so maybe come back to that one later on in answering. But if there's something that immediately pops to mind, certainly feel free to share that. And while you're talking about that, I'm going to mention to people that you can learn more about what Patrick does and his company, the Jinks Perspective, online by you can Google the Jinks Perspective, and you're going to find his site and learn more about what he does. And yes, that work is focused on nonprofits and to some degree corporations, but you're going to see a lot of the perspective. You're going to see a lot of the philosophy behind what Patrick does, and you're going to see a lot of the resources that he promotes if you go to the site. So last comments, thoughts, answers to that question, whatever you'd like to finish with, Patrick.
I'll go back and look at some of the reading lists we did. I don't have them off the top of my head. There's books like The Steward Leader. I don't know. Again, many of the works that we looked at were faith-based works, but I can look at some of those. It made me think of stewardship differently than
Yeah, I
just
like that.
protecting. And it's a responsibility. And so, Carol, great question. Give me a little bit to go and maybe pull up that reading list and recommend a few resources that aren't coming to the top of my mind right now. But great question.
Patrick, thank you once again for taking the time to be here. You mentioned that you and I hadn't connected deeply for, I'm going to put it out there, it's been like 16 years since I sat in that class. But the fact that we have continued to stay in touch, the fact that we've continued to look toward each other as a source and a resource, that it means a lot to me to have the relationship and the friendship that we do. So thank you for taking the time to be here and for
Mm.
sharing such valuable perspectives on
It's an
leadership.
incredible honor to get to do this, Steve. Thanks.
Well, thank you. All right, take care of yourself.
All right. Thanks.
And quite frankly, it's over the years, Patrick mentioned, we've talked a little bit about the fact that our meeting came about when we were both with United Way years ago. And the class that he's talking about was just a few days back in Virginia and Alexandria, Virginia. And at the time, I left there with just this sense of the kind of qualities and the kind of skills and the kind of leadership that Patrick Jinks presents, and reached out to him almost immediately, I think first on LinkedIn, just to stay in touch. And we've stayed in touch over the years, and I continue to learn from him and continue to appreciate what he brings. So again, thank you to Patrick for being here. I want to tell you very quickly some things that are coming up in the next few weeks. We're going to have next week, we're going to have an author on. This is, to me, is very interesting. And in fact, I've been in the process of reading her new book that has just come out. But Eve O. Schaub she's an engaging and humorous and yet very informative author. And she talks about an experiment in this book that she and her family went through, where they decided to take an entire year and see if they could completely eliminate waste, completely eliminate garbage. And what they went through in the process, and what she learned and what she shares, even some things that we take for granted in the form of disposable waste and even recycling, is very revealing. But it's going to be a lot of fun to talk to Eve. And then in a couple of weeks, this is almost seems like a corollary to our conversation a week or so ago with Leanne Joshua about humor in our lives. And one of the things that she brought up was the importance of finding fun and finding play. And there are some actual studies out there about the importance of play, not just for kids, but playtime for adults. And so we're going to talk about that in a couple of weeks. And then in 3 weeks, this one's going to be fun. Shalann's going to join me. She comes on from time to time to co-host, and we're going to play a little game, and you're going to be a part of it. It's going to be very interactive. But we use quotes so often. We quote people, we quote movies, we quote plays, we quote things from books or from other writing. And oftentimes we may not realize it, but we grew up learning something wrong. We may have thought that a quote went a certain way and we misquote it. Or we take it out of context. We don't understand what it refers to, or we misattribute it to a source that's not its own. So we're going to take a little bit of time to play a little game where we're going to see how well we know some famous quotes and what they actually say and where they actually came from. If you have ideas about topics or guests that you would like to see on Coffee Breaks with Steve, would you please let me know? Many of the guests that we have, many of the topics that we discuss come from you. This is your coffee table, your virtual coffee table as well. So I would just appreciate it if you would take the time, just share your ideas. You may think, well, that one's kind of corny, or that one's kind of crazy, or there's no way. Nothing's crazy and nothing's too corny. I'm not sure if that made sense, but we appreciate the comments. We appreciate the opportunities to see what kind of topics we can bring on here. So just do that. And I would just also remind you that just as we've been talking about here, we're all leaders. We are all leaders. You're a leader. You may or may not recognize the roles that you play in the lives of other people. And sometimes we don't even realize how much of an influence we have on somebody else. Sometimes they come back to us and tell us, even at a later time, that there was something that we may have done that seemed very insignificant at the moment. But Patrick talked about that. It's the moments when we may influence in a way that's positive. And so I just want to remind you and invite you, as I do every week, to please find a way to make a difference in your world this week. God bless you. Have a great week, and I'll see you next time.